We are holding out.
A Bridge Too Far wasn't just another war epic, it was chaos disguised as history. What began as Hollywood's grand retelling of Operation Market Garden turned into a battlefield of clashing egos, runaway costs, and real soldiers reliving trauma on camera. Explosives misfired, tempers exploded, and director Richard Attenborough's obsession with realism pushed cast and crew to the breaking point. From Sean Connery's on-set rebellion to the psychological toll on veterans who advised the film, production became its own war. Here are 20 weird facts about A Bridge Too Far, how the most expensive war movie of its time almost collapsed under its own ambition, and stay till the end. Because what happened to the real bridge after filming will shock you. Let's cross it. Fact number 1, Richard Attenborough mortgaged his house to complete the film. When costs exploded past $25 million, about $120 million today tours, studios pulled back. Rather than cut corners, Attenborough mortgaged his own home to keep filming. It wasn't symbolic, and if the movie failed, he could have lost everything. His wife pleaded, accountants warned bankruptcy, but he'd promised Market Garden veterans an honest retelling. Crew learned of his risk and volunteered pay cuts. Attenborough slept in editing rooms, juggling creditors while rewriting schedules to stretch every pound. The gamble barely paid off. The movie scraped a modest profit overseas. Years later, he said he aged 10 years in one production. Courage on screen began behind the camera. Fact number 2, real Operation Market Garden. Veterans served as consultants and had breakdowns on set. Attenborough hired real veterans as advisors, including Major Tony Hibbert, who fought at Arnhem. Walking rebuilt streets of destruction broke them. Some wept openly. Others collapsed during explosion scenes that triggered wartime flashbacks. 3 men required medical evacuation. Counselors were brought in. Their presence reshaped performances. They scolded actors for looking too clean, demanding visible fear and fatigue. Edward Fox said the veterans taught us what bravery really looked like. It wasn't glamorous. For them, A Bridge Too Far wasn't entertainment. It was a memorial reborn in fire and noise. Fact number 3. Sean Connery and Michael Caine refused to film scenes together due to billing disputes. 2 British icons, one giant clash. Sean Connery and Michael Caine feuded over top billing. Each demanded first credit. Agents traded threats. Attenborough solved it alphabetically, but Connery exploded, calling it insulting. He and Caine filmed on separate days, their shared scenes stitched together later via editing and radio chatter. Crew were warned never to mention one actor near the other. Connery later called it his most unpleasant shoot. Caine brushed it off as creative differences. Ironically, their characters symbolize Allied cooperation. Off camera, cooperation had surrendered long before Arnhem did. Fact number 4, the production used more explosives than some actual World War II battles. Special effects chief John Richardson unleashed over 11 tons of explosives, nearly what the Allies fired in a full day of Arnhem combat. During one miscalculated blast, shrapnel soared twice the planned height, knocking Robert Redford to the ground and damaging cameras. 5 crew suffered temporary hearing loss. Dutch authorities considered halting filming after residents reported cracked windows and trembling walls. The production quietly paid $180,000 for repairs and rewrote safety codes mid-shoot. Richardson vowed never again to match a real war's firepower. For 3 days, the set fell silent, and everyone realized how real they'd made the make-believe. Fact number 5, Robert Redford hated his role and tried to quit multiple times. Redford expected depth. He got heroism. Playing Major Julian Cook, he begged for rewrites that added moral conflict. Attenborough refused, accuracy over artistry. Redford tried to walk, but contract penalties trapped him. His frustration bled through. Late arrivals, cold takes, and open tension with Gene Hackman, who accused him of unprofessionalism. Crew broke up a shouting match between them. Years later, Redford admitted, "I was wrong, I didn't see what the film was doing." Ironically, critics later hailed his restrained performance as the film's beating heart. Sometimes resentment fuels realism. Fact number 6, The Dutch government initially banned filming at the actual Arnhem Bridge. When Attenborough requested to film at the real bridge, officials refused. The trauma was still raw. Locals feared bombs, noise, and memories they'd buried for 30 years. The director personally visited Arnhem, promising respect and restoration funds. Only after veterans sent a joint plea did the city relent, imposing strict rules: no filming on battle anniversaries, mandatory donations to war memorials, and full repair of any damage. The compromise delayed production 7 months but transformed locals' hostility into pride. By Wrap Day, survivors who once opposed filming stood cheering behind the cameras. Fact number 7. Dirk Bogarde became physically ill from the emotional intensity of his role. Portraying Lieutenant General Browning broke Dirk Bogarde. He immersed himself in the officer's guilt-ridden letters until nightmares and insomnia took over. During Browning's breakdown scene, Bogarde literally vomited after each take. Attenborough captured one raw performance and refused further retakes. Bogarde was too shaken. He lost 15 pounds, developed ulcers, and swore never to play another soldier. Later he wrote, "It felt like borrowing a dead man's despair." The haunting realism audiences admired was a real man unraveling on screen. Fact number 8. The parachute drop sequences used real airborne troops who were genuinely terrified. To capture authentic airborne drops, Attenborough hired 350 British paratroopers. They leapt from vintage C-47s using 1940s gear. Heavy, unpredictable, and unsafe. One chute failed. The reserve opened seconds from impact. Afterward, soldiers hesitated to continue until Attenborough told them none were required to jump again. Pride took over. Every man volunteered. 3 broke bones, 1 shattered an ankle. Their genuine fear is visible in slow-motion footage, wide eyes, clenched jaws. No stunt can fake that. The Army later banned active troops from performing film stunts. Real courage, real consequences. Fact number 9. Gene Hackman's Polish accent was coached by actual Polish officers who argued constantly about authenticity. To play General Sosabowski, Gene Hackman endured chaos in the dialect tent. 3 Polish advisors contradicted each other about the general's speech, educated, guttural, or French-tinged. Their bickering turned personal. They shouted in Polish until translators stepped in. Exhausted, Hackman studied recordings and invented a balanced tone himself. When he performed, 2 consultants applauded. The third stormed off in protest, later returning to apologize. Attenborough called Hackman's take the soul of determination. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next 10 facts only get wilder. Fact number 10. The film's failure at the American box office was blamed on anti-war sentiment after Vietnam. Released in 1977, A Bridge Too Far met audiences weary of war. Americans, still raw from Vietnam, shunned depictions of failure. The film grossed just $21 million domestically despite glowing reviews. Paramount considered a heroic re-edit. Attenborough threatened legal action. Europe embraced the movie, and especially Britain and the Netherlands. But Hollywood recoiled. The setback sent Attenborough into a 5-year directing hiatus and changed studio policy. Future war films had to end in victory. History lost to marketing. Fact number 11. Ryan O'Neal's career never recovered from the film's reception. Ryan O'Neal played Brigadier General James M. Gavin with professional competence. That was the problem. In a cast of theatrical heavyweights delivering intense performances, O'Neal's restrained approach made him forgettable. Critics barely mentioned him. When they did, it wasn't flattering. Variety called him curiously absent, even when on screen. O'Neal had been on a hot streak before the film with successful roles in Love Story and Paper Moon. Hollywood expected him to hold his own against Connery, Caine, and Redford. He didn't. Casting directors noticed. O'Neal's agent fielded fewer offers after release. The roles that came were smaller, less prestigious. O'Neal later admitted that A Bridge Too Far marked the beginning of his career decline. Though he didn't blame the film itself, he blamed his own performance, saying he'd been intimidated by the legendary actors surrounding him and had played it safe. That safety was invisibility. By the early 1980s, O'Neal was doing television work. By the 1990s, he was accepting roles in direct-to-video releases. The trajectory from leading man to character actor happened fast, and industry insiders pointed to A Bridge Too Far as the inflection point. One film didn't destroy his career, but it revealed limitations that Hollywood couldn't ignore. Fact number 12. Anthony Hopkins filmed his scenes in just 5 days and delivered the film's most memorable performance. Lieutenant Colonel John Frost was the soul of Arnhem's defense, and Anthony Hopkins understood that immediately. Hopkins was hired late in production as a replacement when another actor dropped out. He had 5 days to prepare, 5 days to film, and he created magic. Hopkins researched obsessively during those preparation days, reading Frost's memoirs and interviewing him personally. The real Frost was initially skeptical of the young actor but was won over by Hopkins's intensity and intelligence. On set, Hopkins demanded minimal takes. He'd arrived knowing exactly what he wanted to deliver. Attenborough was astounded by his efficiency and emotional precision. The scene where Frost realizes no relief is coming, standing amid the rubble of his positions, was filmed in one take at dawn. Hopkins later said he channeled his own father's experiences in World War II, tapping into generational trauma he'd never fully processed. Despite limited screen time, Hopkins dominated reviews. Critics praised his quiet devastation and dignified courage. Now, Frost himself called Hopkins' portrayal extraordinarily accurate, and the two became friends until Frost's death. Hopkins later said the role taught him the power of restraint, a lesson that defined his subsequent career. 5 days of work resulted in a performance that anchored a 3-hour epic. Fact number 13. The recreation of Arnhem required building over 300 period-accurate buildings from scratch. Production designer Terrence Marsh faced an impossible task. Arnhem in 1944 was a specific place at a specific time, and modern Netherlands looked nothing like it. Marsh convinced Attenborough to build a partial city rather than rely on existing locations. Over 300 structures were constructed in the Dutch countryside, including houses, shops, a church, and municipal buildings. Each was designed from photographs and architect drawings from the 1940s. The construction crew numbered over 400 people and worked for 9 months before filming began. Windows were custom-made using period glass. Bricks were sourced from demolished buildings of the Wright era. Street signs, lampposts, and even cobblestones were historically accurate. The cost was staggering. Over $4 million just for the sets, equivalent to $20 million today. Dutch craftsmen were stunned by the attention to detail. One builder, whose grandfather had lived in Arnhem during the battle, broke down crying while constructing a house identical to one destroyed in the fighting. After filming, the production was contractually obligated to demolish everything. Locals protested, wanting to preserve the sets as a memorial. The Dutch government negotiated a compromise. Selected buildings would remain as a historical exhibit. Today, 3 structures from the film still stand, maintained by the Arnhem War Museum as testament to both the battle and the film. Fact number 14. Laurence Olivier was so ill during filming that producers prepared replacement scenes in case he died. Laurence Olivier, playing Dr. Sponder, was fighting cancer and heart disease simultaneously. His casting was controversial, with insurance companies refusing to cover him without extraordinary premiums. Attenborough paid the extra cost personally, determined to work with his idol. Olivier arrived on set visibly frail. Between takes, he required oxygen. Medical personnel were on standby during every scene. His voice, once the most commanding in theater, now came in raspy whispers. The makeup department couldn't hide his deterioration. Attenborough rewrote scenes to accommodate Olivier's condition, reducing dialogue and physical movement. Olivier was furious, insisting he could deliver full performances. During one argument, he collapsed from exhaustion and had to be hospitalized overnight. Producers quietly filmed alternate versions of his scenes with a stand-in, preparing for the possibility of recasting. Olivier discovered this and was devastated, seeing it as evidence his career was over. Attenborough visited him in his trailer and apologized, explaining it was insurance requirement, not lack of faith. Olivier rallied and delivered every scene as written. His performance was poignant partly because audiences could see his mortality on screen. Olivier survived until 1989, but A Bridge Too Far was one of his final significant film roles. He later told Attenborough that the experience reminded him why he loved acting. It was worth suffering for. Fact number 15. One of the tanks used in filming went rogue and destroyed part of a Dutch village. Military equipment from the 1940s isn't designed for reliability in the 1970s. One Sherman tank, restored specifically for the production, had brake system problems that mechanics assured producers were resolved. During a scene filmed in a small Dutch village, the tank's brakes failed completely while descending a hill. The driver attempted emergency procedures but couldn't stop the 30-ton vehicle. It crashed through a garden wall, demolished a chicken coop, destroyed a vintage automobile parked on the street, and finally stopped when it collided with a stone barn that partially collapsed. Miraculously, no one was injured. One was made. The village's residents were evacuating chickens and had moved away from the tank's path moments before impact. Production halted immediately. Attenborough personally visited every affected household to apologize. The insurance claims were extensive, and the village's mayor threatened to revoke all filming permits. The production paid for complete restoration of damaged properties, plus significant financial compensation to each affected family. The mayor insisted on a ceremonial apology in front of the entire village. Attenborough complied, giving a speech acknowledging the production's responsibility. The incident added $340,000 to the budget and caused a week-long delay. The tank was permanently removed from service. One Dutch newspaper ran the headline, "British invade Netherlands again, still cause damage," which Attenborough admitted was fair. Fact number 16. The film's portrayal of Polish forces caused a diplomatic incident with Communist Poland. Gene Hackman's character, General Sosabowski, was a controversial figure in Cold War politics. The real Sosabowski was a fierce anti-communist who'd fled to Britain rather than return to Soviet-dominated Poland. The film portrayed him as a hero whose warnings about market garden were ignored. Communist Poland's government was furious. They viewed Sosabowski as a traitor and his rehabilitation in Western media as propaganda. Polish state media attacked the film viciously before its release, calling it fascist historical revisionism. The Polish embassy in London filed formal complaints with the British Foreign Office. Attenborough was stunned by the political firestorm. He'd focused on military history, not contemporary politics. The controversy attracted unexpected attention to the film in Eastern Europe. Bootleg copies circulated in Poland despite government bans, becoming symbols of resistance. Polish opposition groups used Sosabowski's story as inspiration, arguing that their government feared honest history. When democracy came to Poland in 1989, Sosabowski was officially rehabilitated. His family credited A Bridge Too Far with keeping his story alive during the communist era. The film that caused a diplomatic incident in 1977 was later celebrated in Free Poland as historical justice. Attenborough attended a Warsaw screening in 1991 and received a standing ovation from Polish veterans. Fact number 17. Wolfgang Preiss, playing German General Ludwig, actually served in the Wehrmacht during World War II. Casting a former German soldier was Attenborough's most controversial decision. Wolfgang Preiss had been conscripted into the Wehrmacht at age 19 and served on the Eastern Front. He was never accused of anything terrible, but had been part of the German military machine. British veterans working as consultants objected strenuously. Some refused to work with him. Preiss offered to withdraw from the production to avoid controversy. Attenborough refused, arguing that reconciliation meant working with former enemies. The solution was a meeting between Preiss and British veterans where he could explain his history. Preiss spoke honestly about being a teenage conscript with no choice, his horror at what he'd witnessed, and his commitment to ensuring Germany never repeated those mistakes. It was raw and emotional. Most veterans accepted him, a few never did. On set, Preiss was professional but isolated. He ate meals alone, few actors socialized with him. James Caan, playing Staff Sergeant Eddie Dohun, befriended him and helped integrate him with the cast. Preiss later said the experience was therapeutic, forcing him to confront his past publicly. His performance was praised for nuance, showing German officers as professional soldiers rather than monsters or caricatures. The casting choice reflected Attenborough's belief that war films should pursue truth over comfortable myths. Fact number 18. The bridge itself had to be reinforced with modern steel because it was structurally unsound. The Arnhem Bridge wasn't the original from 1944. That bridge was destroyed and rebuilt in the 1950s. By the 1970s, the replacement bridge was aging and couldn't safely support modern military vehicles needed for filming. Dutch engineers conducted safety inspections and delivered bad news. The bridge might collapse under the weight of tanks and trucks. Filming couldn't proceed without major structural work. The Dutch government initially refused to pay for reinforcement, arguing it was the production's responsibility. Negotiations were intense. Eventually, a compromise was reached. The production would pay for modern steel reinforcement that would remain after filming, effectively upgrading Netherlands' infrastructure. The work cost $780,000 and took 6 weeks. During that time, the bridge was closed to civilian traffic, causing commuter chaos. Local businesses lost revenue. The production paid compensation to affected shops and restaurants. When reinforcement was complete, the bridge was stronger than it had been in decades. The Dutch government later admitted the production had forced necessary repairs they'd been delaying. Ironically, a film about a bridge operation failing had actually saved the real bridge from potential collapse. The reinforcement steel remains in place today, and a small plaque acknowledges that A Bridge Too Far production made the modern bridge possible. Fact number 19. The film's premiere was attended by Queen Elizabeth II and became a referendum on Britain's military history. The royal premiere in June 1977 was more than a movie opening. It became a national conversation about how Britain remembered World War II. Queen Elizabeth II attended with Prince Philip, both of whom had lived through the war. The audience included numerous Arnhem veterans, some in wheelchairs, some with visible injuries. When the lights dimmed and the film began, the atmosphere was tense. This wasn't entertainment for these men. It was their trauma displayed for public consumption. During the battle sequences, several veterans left the theater. Others wept openly. At intermission, the mood was somber. Veterans weren't sure whether to feel honored or exploited. When the film ended and the credits rolled, there was silence. Then one veteran, a former paratrooper who'd lost his legs at Arnhem, began applauding. Others joined. Within moments, the entire theater was standing. The Queen herself stood and applauded, a rare gesture. The veterans were applauding not the film's entertainment value, but its honesty. It had shown their failure without shame, their sacrifice without false glory. Media coverage focused on the veterans' reactions more than the film itself. The Daily Telegraph wrote that Britain has finally confronted Arnhem without flinching. The premiere transformed A Bridge Too Far from a commercial project into a cultural artifact about how nations remember military tragedy. Fact number 20, Richard Attenborough considered the film his greatest achievement despite its financial failure. Attenborough directed Gandhi, which won 8 Academy Awards. He directed Cry Freedom and Shadowlands, critical darlings both. But he always called A Bridge Too Far his most important work. Not his best, not his most acclaimed, but his most important. In later interviews, he explained why. Gandhi was about moral triumph. A Bridge Too Far was about noble failure, which he considered more human and more honest. The film taught him that historical films had to respect their subjects above all other considerations, including commercial success and star egos. He'd nearly lost everything making it, and he'd do it again. Veterans continued writing to him until his death in 2014, thanking him for telling their story accurately. Those letters, he said, mattered more than any award. The film influenced how war was portrayed in cinema, prioritizing complex strategy and realistic consequences over Hollywood heroics. Spielberg cited it as an influence on Saving Private Ryan. The film's financial failure haunted him, but only because it limited his ability to make similar ambitious historical films. He spent decades trying to mount another large-scale World War II project, but couldn't secure financing. Studios remembered the A Bridge Too Far budget disaster and declined. Attenborough's ambition had created a masterpiece that Hollywood punished him for. Bonus fact: the film's release reignited Dutch interest in Operation Market Garden's history. Arnhem citizens petitioned their government to honor Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, whose stand at the bridge had become legendary through the movie. In 1978, the Dutch government officially renamed the structure John Frostbrug. Frost himself attended the ceremony, overwhelmed by the honor. He credited the film with reminding people that the battle wasn't just British history, but Dutch history, fought to liberate their country. The renaming sparked a broader movement to memorialize market garden sites throughout the Netherlands. Museums expanded. Memorial parks were created. The film became required viewing in Dutch schools studying World War II. Anthony Hopkins attended the renaming ceremony with Frost, creating the surreal image of the actor and the man he portrayed standing together on the bridge where it all happened. Frost joked that Hopkins was better looking, and Hopkins replied that Frost was far braver. The bridge remains one of Netherlands' most visited historical sites, with tourists specifically seeking the location from A Bridge Too Far. A film about a military disaster created a living memorial that ensures the sacrifice is never forgotten. A Bridge Too Far wasn't just a movie. It was a 3-hour meditation on the cost of ambition, the weight of history, and the courage required to tell uncomfortable truths. Behind every explosion was a veteran remembering. Behind every performance was an actor wrestling with inadequacy before real heroism. Behind the camera was a director who risked everything because some stories matter more than careers. If you found these facts as mind-blowing as the production itself, smash that like button and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes chaos from cinema history. Drop a comment with which fact shocked you most, and remember, in war and in filmmaking, it's not always about the victory. Sometimes it's about honoring the attempt. Sometimes a bridge too far is exactly the distance worth traveling.